Well, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. I know Mike's got a decent amount to get to, so we're going to go ahead and get started here. Anybody else jumps on? And yes, if you attended our pro webinar on Tuesday, that one did not get recorded. That was my fault, but today it is recording. I'm staring at it right now. So yes, I got it recording. So don't worry, this will be recorded. Anybody else that didn't join will have that going. So I'm going to go ahead and share on my screen. So again, welcome. Thank you guys all for attending today. Our part 2 webinar, Survey123 Connect, incorporating logic and other advanced concepts. Like always, we're continually trying to bring you guys content, webinars. So a little slower in October. This is the last one for September, a little slower in October with multiple conferences and things going on. It'll just, all that. So just one in October, that's for ArcGIS Indoors, specifically in the fire prevention, incident planning, kind of going the safety route and how ArcGIS Indoors can help with that. Then in November, we've got another on parcel fabric, always a well-attended webinar there with Matt. And then, like I said, part 3 of the 3-part series that you guys are in right now. So part 3, incorporating Survey123 into collector with related records. That's November 19th, 10, another half hour, 10 in the morning there. And then last one there for the year in December, another on ArcGIS Indoors. So that's with John. December 15th. We currently don't have anything scheduled for next year. We will be meeting and kind of going over and potentially planning out the full year's worth of content and webinars. Obviously, this isn't going away, doing things virtually, whether it's meeting or just obviously conferences, training, education, things like that. So we'll probably be meeting here in the next couple months and planning out a full slate. And once that's all ready to go, I'll get that all up on our page. Obviously, cloudpointgeo.com/webinars is where you go for that to register and view what we have, and also then view the recordings. Cloudpointgeo.com/recordings is where you can sign up and get access to the unlisted YouTube channel. So you have exclusive access to the recordings of our webinars. We use Zoom for all our webinars, of course, so we've got the Q&A box. You can submit your questions at any time. We'll try to get to those at the end. We'll allot a few minutes there. Obviously, the chat box, a couple of you guys have already jumped in there, said hi, and talked to us there. So at any point in time, if something goes on, you can't see or hear, or just want to chat with us, shoot us a message in the chat box. I'll be monitoring that. And then tomorrow, I think a couple of you, maybe a couple names I recognize are signed up. Tomorrow, we're having our second Public Works GIS Solutions virtual showcase. So obviously virtual, it's a half day. Just public works, city engineers, county engineers, GIS folks, anything that you have to do with public works, it's going to be a really good showcase. Our first one in May was very well attended. Got a lot of good feedback, so we're really looking forward to doing that tomorrow. So still have time to sign up for that, cloudpointgeo.com/virtual showcase. We'll have Mitch Winnicky from Esri doing a presentation, and then our engineers and techs here at Cloudpoint will be doing a couple presentations as well. So obviously you guys know us from a lot of different areas, industries. We've got specialty in AGO, local government, our indoor specialty that we recently received, enterprise, kickstarts, even mapping cemeteries, all sorts of utility networks. But more importantly, today we're talking about Survey123 Connect, and Mike's going to go over that. I will turn this over to Mike. Go ahead, Mike.
All right. Yep. Thank you, Bill. Go ahead and share my screen here. All right. And let's hop right back in to our PowerPoint here. What I want to do today is kind of take a look at what we've covered so far, what we're going to cover today, and where we're going to be going into the future for our final webinar, as Bill mentioned, is happening in November. So in our first webinar, what we did was we took an overview look at Survey123 Connect. We learned how to navigate the menus. We took a look at the XLS form and how to navigate that, how it ties in with our survey, how we build our survey using the XLS form, and we can preview it, publish it, all that good stuff. Today what we're going to do is we're going to build on that foundation. We're going to take the concepts we learned in the first webinar, we're going to build on those, we're going to make our survey a little bit more advanced. We're going to see some of the other functions and abilities what we can do to beef up our surveys in Survey123 Connect. We're going to look at some relevancies, some calculations, and some other advanced survey techniques to really beef up our surveys and help benefit our end users, streamline their survey, their data collection process. And finally, in our next webinar, what I'm really looking forward to is putting our survey to use. What we're going to do is we're going to take our survey we built in the first two webinars, and we're going to utilize that against a real-world example of using our survey on culvert inspections. And so we're going to tie it all together. We're going to see how our survey can be used using those culvert inspections with, we're going to tie it into collector, Esri's collector application for field data entry and collection. And we're also going to see how related records can serve us as a powerful tool for using Survey123 in data collection. So now I'm going to go ahead and we're going to hop back into our XLS form. All right, so hopefully this view will look familiar to everybody. On the left, we have our XLS form, which is basically Excel. Survey123 Connect uses the Excel format to let us beef up and build our surveys. On the right, we have the Survey123 Connect app. This is previewing our survey form as we build it in the Connect application. So hopefully, again, this will look familiar to everybody, but just in case it doesn't, I'll go through a real brief kind of reminder of the overview and basics of Survey123 Connect, navigating our XLS form. Survey123 Connect is built on rows and columns, again, much like Excel. So hopefully, if you're familiar with Excel, you'll be able to pick up Survey123 Connect pretty easily. The first column we have is our data types. These are going to be the data fields for our items in our survey form. So here we can see there's a few different types we're going to utilize in our example survey form here. We have some text fields, some date fields, integer fields. We have one where we're going to be able to kind of create a domain, deselect one field, so we're going to give our end users options to select from when they go to do their survey form. So they're going to give them some options that they can input. We even have some hidden fields, so we're going to explain that a little bit today in our webinar. And again, so hopefully these data types look familiar to folks out there. Stuff that you'd see that you'd build, your attribute fields around, sort of these data types. Our next column is going to be our name of our field. And in this case, we're naming these fields here, and in the name, we're having these be the actual field names of our culvert layer, actually our related table for the inspections records that will live on our culverts layer. Our next column is the label. So this is going to be how this particular item appears in our survey form. So for instance, this asset ID, these rows here, this is going to be, again, our survey items. So our rows are going to be accounting for survey items within our survey form. So at the very top here, this first row, this is going to be our asset ID field. We can see we've got it labeled asset ID, and this is where it's going to appear, again, in our survey form. So as we have our XLS form structured with these rows, the order in which they are is going to appear, or how they will appear in our survey form. So the first thing I'd like to also review today is, along with the XLS form basics, what I want to do is discuss the tabs again, and just kind of how we navigate from tab to tab in XLS. So we have our survey form. Again, this is going to be where we navigate the actual components and build those components of our survey form. The next tab is we have our choices tab. This is where we're going to be able to select and build those drop-down menus from here. So before we went through and we explained this is going to be the name of that domain, that selection list. So here we're looking at our type selection, the name of those inputs. So we're looking at concrete boxes, and the label. So again, how they're going to appear in the data is the name, and how they're labeled in the Survey123 form is that label column. So here's where we're going to build those lists, those domains of options that our users will be able to select from in our survey form. Our next tab is we have our survey settings, and this was a tab that I'll really hit next week, and how we tie our survey form to our culverts layer that lives on ArcGIS Online, and how we're going to be able to get it to talk with collector. So that's in here, that's in this survey tab. Again, not too much I really want to touch on today, but we'll look forward to how we configure this in our next webinar. And finally, the types tab. This is a tab that Esri had put in, and it's just kind of a helpful explanation for us and stuff that we can utilize in our survey forms as kind of a vague set of instructions, or just kind of a user manual almost that Esri put in here to help us kind of navigate and utilize some of these functions available to us in the survey forms. So here we can see, for example, if we wanted to know more about our field types and what those field types are and what they mean, Esri put in this list for us and kind of walks us through which of these field types, what they mean. So for instance, an integer field type that we looked at before, we've got some of those in our survey form. Simply, we just means an integer is a whole number input. So again, just little references like that Esri put in there for us to be able to reference and utilize as we build our survey forms. So with that quick navigation complete, I'd like to hop into what we're going to talk about today. Is we're going to take our survey from last week and beef it up with some advanced techniques. So one of the things I like to touch on too is how the survey form appears can be beneficial to users, and the fact that it will draw attention to certain things, or just in the way that it appears can help users better navigate their survey forms. So one of the things that we can do to add some appearance tricks, and again, this is kind of minor stuff, but still can make a difference for you. We can add in some HTML formatting to change the appearance of some of the items within our survey. So here we can see this label. What I've done is I've taken the HTML formatting for making an item or some text bold, and I've incorporated that here within our labels. You can see I've taken these two carrots with a B to make that bold, and as they appear in our survey, you can see that that text is bold compared to the rest of the text in our survey. And again, a good place to find some of this HTML formatting, just to tie this back in, is our Types tab. If I go back to our Types tab, I'll scroll down, and here we can see some of the HTML formatting that's available to us. We can even see how Esri put in some instructions on how to accomplish this formatting for us. So again, if you're ever wondering, hey, is there something that I can do with this particular survey item or this survey content, feel free to look in the Types tab. There's a lot of helpful information in there on just how you can accomplish a lot of different things with your survey. So hopping back over to the Survey tab, too, what I've also done as far as appearance-wise is I've also taken some hints from our hints column that will help users better answer their questions, that we can put in these hints, and that'll help them either know what they should enter or kind of give them some other direction on how to answer certain items within our survey forms. So here in this hint, what I've done is I've taken my text. The text is enter a rating value between 1 and 10. And you can see instead of making that bold, I made it italicized, just so it gives a little bit more of a different appearance for our end users. We can see that this hint, this column here, this enter a rating value between 1 and 10, is right here. It's going to appear right under the actual label for our survey item. So in this field, we're looking at the structural rating. We can see our hint that I've constructed here in the hints column. Enter a rating between 1 and 10, make it italicized, and that's going to show how it appears in our survey form. So now that we're looking at some of the appearance stuff, so I'll just kind of move through as we navigate the columns in the survey form. I'll kind of hit those a little bit and show and kind of explain what each of those are. The constraints column is the next column. And in this column, what we've done is we've been able to input certain constraints, certain restrictions on the answers that our users can input. So in these particular fields, we've got our structural rating, an opening rating field, and a scour rating field. And what I've done is I've taken these three fields, again, for our culvert inspections, and I've made them uniform. I made them essentially the same type of field. They're all integer fields, and I want them to behave all identically. So what I've done is I've taken them and entered them basically identically in my survey form. So you can see they all have the same hint, they all have the same constraint, and they all have the same constraint message. So what I want my users to do with this field is I want them to enter in a value between 1 and 10. So I've created this expression that a constraint saying the user has to enter a value greater than 0, but they can't enter, or they have to enter a value greater than 0, and they can enter a value less than 11. So that will constrain their answers between 1 and 10. A constraint message is just a helpful message that a user will get if they fall outside of those constraints. So for instance, what I'd like to show now, if I try to enter 12, for example, again, that does not meet our constraints. When I go to submit my survey, it's going to tell me, hey, there's a warning here. Your value must be between 1 and 10. That's our constraint message. So that's kind of how some of those will help narrow some of your answers that are certain inputs that your end users will be able to give you. And then it'll be able to show a helpful message for them. Hey, this is why it didn't work. It has to be so on and so forth, this value. Up next, we have the required column. If we want to make any answers particularly required so that every time a user goes to submit this survey, they must answer this question. And we'll say, sure, this answer has to be required simply. We'll just say yes. If not, no required fields in your survey, just leave it blank. And again, the required message works much like the constraint message. So I would say, this field is required. Just something simple like that to make sure the user knows, hey, I have to give an answer. I have to enter an input for this field. Next is the appearance, and we kind of touched on the appearance last time in our first webinar. And this is a real kind of basic thing. It just shows how the answers appear and how the items appear in your survey form. So for these, I have them set as minimal, which just means, again, they're appearing as one line item, just one little bar, one little box that my users will see in the survey form. Next, we're going to look at our default field, and this is another one we touched on in our first webinar. But I'd like to point out that we can have certain default values for certain answers so that certain users will not have to worry about answering certain questions, or if there's an input that's inputted a lot pretty frequently in these survey forms, we can have it default to a certain answer. So that just kind of streamlines and makes it a lot easier on end users when they're entering their survey information. For our inspection date item in our survey form, I've entered a default of today so that we can see in our survey form by default, every time there's a new survey going to be collected, it's automatically going to populate with today's date, whatever the date is that the end user goes to enter the survey. Next, we've got read-only. So in the fields that I made read-only, this is going to mean that users cannot change inputs in these fields. So on the fields that I have as read-only, we're going to be able to see I cannot interact with these survey items. They're read-only. They cannot be edited or changed or inputted by end users. These top two are going to come in a lot handy in our third and final webinar, as these are going to be fields that relate just to specific culverts as we're performing inspections on them. But in this case, I don't want my users to be able to change any of the asset ID or the global ID of my culverts. So I've made them read-only so that a user can't accidentally change any of those values there. The next column is the relevant column, and this is where we can say we can hide or make certain questions appear based on users' answers to previous questions, to previous survey items. So in this case, what I've done is my recommended action field, our recommended action survey item here, is simply a yes or no, a select one field that we created a choice list for. We just simply said yes or no. What we've done here is we've created this arcade expression, as you can see right here in the relevant column. If an end user selects from the recommended action field, if they select yes, what that's going to do is it's going to make another survey item appear that's currently hidden. So if I say yes on my maintenance action required, what that's going to do is it's going to make this recommended actions appear. So the end user saying, hey, there is some sort of follow-up maintenance that needs to be done on this culvert, and when they select yes, we're going to make this certain survey item appear for them that they're going to be able to follow up and enter a follow-up question to specify what that recommended action would be on that culvert. And this is useful in some cases if you've got a big survey form that not all of your survey items need to be answered by a user. If they only meet certain criteria, hey, yeah, go ahead and answer this question, but don't always show it in my survey because it may not always apply. So in this case, if I were to say, no, there's no maintenance action required on this culvert, it's good, looks pristine, we'll say no. And again, that's going to hide that field that we don't need in there. It's just something else to kind of make data collection easier on your end user. Now the next field here is our calculation field, and you can see I have a lot of stuff jumbled in there. This calculation field comes in handy because it calculates certain values for your answers ahead of time in your survey. So you can see I've got a lot of calculation formulas in there. This is using arcade. So we can build these arcade expressions in our calculation column here on our survey form to help us calculate and automate some calculations within our survey form. So what I like to do is I like to show how this works on our 3 rating fields: our structural rating, our opening rating, and our scour rating. So what I've done here is I've taken our integer fields for our structure rating. Again, that's this field right here that we've talked about. We're constraining our users to a value between 1 and 10. If I go ahead and I select, I'm going to enter 10. What I've done here is I'm saying enter. Our next field, their structural condition field, pops up and automatically calculates as excellent. And what I'd like to show is kind of how I made that happen. Here in my notepad is something we can look at a little bit easier than looking at in the XLS form. So I've created this arcade expression to calculate that structural condition field based on the value that our users enter in their rating field, in their respective integer fields. So here I've broken it down. If the structural rating field, again, this is the field name, if structural rating is entered as 10, call it excellent. If structural rating is 9, call it very good. And you can see the different options. So as the users go down and they enter lower and lower values, again, the condition, the rating of that culvert is going to be worse. So we can see we've defined each one of the possible values that a user can select from their constrained values between 1 and 10. And we've created, if those conditions are met, so if they put in a 2, calculate my answer in this survey item to equal this input. So again, if they enter 10, their condition is going to be excellent. And this is an if-then statement. So what I'm saying is if all of these conditions are met, give them their respective value. But if not, I said enter a structural rating. So if it's blank, that's just kind of helping them to direct them to enter a value in that particular field. So like I said before, I have all these fields structured the exact same way. So there's going to be some feel of continuity for our end users here. So if I go to enter an opening rating, say this is just 5, our opening condition is going to appear as poor. So I'd like to point out how these condition fields are structured. So these condition fields are based on a select 1 type in our survey form. So I said select 1 aspect rating. So again, we can see these choices list that we built from our choices tab in our survey form. We can see this is our aspect rating here. So what I've done is I've given the list name to all of our possible inputs. I've said enter a scour rating. These are our possible options that our users can select from. So again, if they select 10, it's going to appear as excellent. We've just built that list here in our choices tab. So we've defined those values to appear in our question later from this list. So what I've done here is I'm on my actual condition field, not the rating field where the users will enter the value, the actual condition field. So in the condition fields, what we've done is we've given this calculation to this field. And again, looking at our formula, we're saying if the structural rating field, the field above it, where they enter their rating value and the integer field, if that value is 10, we're going to call it excellent. So that's how this calculation field works in practice. And what I've done is I've made another field for combining all of our 3 aspect ratings. So if I go ahead and I put in for our scour rating, our final rating, I'll give that a 7. We can see the different range here. So 10 is excellent. Again, 5, the opening rating, that's just poor. And our scour rating of 7, that's satisfactory. So that just streamlines, again, data collection for our end users. They're not having to define what a 10 means or define what 5 means in a rating value, a rating range of 1 to 10. We're calculating that for them. And so now what I've done, one more thing I'd like to point out today is I've got this overall culvert rating calculation that takes into account the total values of the 3 integers that we have from before. So what I've done is I've made a hidden field. We've called this culvert rating calculation. And this is just a field that's calculating the total value of the 3 integer fields, our 3 aspect rating, our rating fields. Again, the structural rating, opening rating, and scour rating. We're taking that total in this hidden field. We're not seeing this field because it's just doing the calculation. And then in our actual select 1 culvert rating field that we see in our survey, we're referencing this field name, so we're referencing this calculation. And this calculation is set up much like I've done the same. So I've defined each value between 3 and 30, which is our possible ranges here. If we have users enter ones for every field, the minimum they can get is 3. And if they enter tens, the maximum they can achieve is 30. That would be a perfect culvert. So what this calculation, this one's a real long, big, long one. But again, what I've done is I've defined each possible value so that, for example, when a user enters a culvert rating of 3, which is the lowest possible, it's going to give us a value of imminent failure. If they enter a value, if that total calculation value is between 4 or is 4 or 5, it's going to be critical. If they enter 6 or 7, it's serious, or 8 is also serious as well. So what we're doing is if I change any of these values, you're going to see this total culvert rating change. So if I drop this down to a 1, I'll go ahead and I'll drop this 5 down to a 1. It's moving. It's calculating all those 3 values and giving our total overall culvert rating. So that is also a way that we can utilize calculations to also help streamline data collection for our end users. And finally, again, say we have a poor culvert, it's in poor rating, poor condition. We're going to say, hey, yeah, there's some maintenance action required here. Something needs to be fixed with this culvert. So again, we'll select yes from our survey, and our relevancy is met for our required action field. So now our recommended action field pops up, and we're going to be able to select, again, some of the inputs that we've defined in our choices tab in our survey form. So as you can see, our survey form has much evolved from the very basic survey form in our first webinar. Those are the topics that I'd like to hit today. So I'd like to check now if anybody has any questions for us regarding our survey.
None right now. So guys, if you got any questions, go ahead and drop those in the Q&A box and we'll get to as many as we can. I'm going to send you guys a couple links here though while we're waiting.
And I am really excited for the third and final webinar. Now that we kind of have our survey form built, we have kind of the overall basics of how to navigate and build in some of these concepts into our survey form using Survey123 Connect. I'm really excited to show you how this workflow of culvert inspections is completed using our survey form. So I'd like to encourage everyone to stick around for that third and final webinar. It'll kind of put a bow on top of it. I'm looking forward to doing that webinar for sure.
Yeah, perfect. Definitely. That's great. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen over yours there. Let's see. Oh, we had a question come in. Where can I access the first one? I will send you guys. It's on our recordings page. I'll send that in the chat box here. Go to cloudpointgeo.com/recordings. And there's a little sign up there. Once you register there, it'll give you a link to a playlist that has actually all of our webinar recordings. But we'll just wrap up here, guys. Just want to thank you very much for attending today. Like Mike said, we're glad to see so much interest in this topic, and really breaking it out into this 3-part series has really been a nice kind of cool thing. So we're definitely looking to continue that. Obviously, you can get a hold of us, cloudpointgeo.com/contact. You got my email up there on the screen, phone number here at the office, and you want to talk to us directly. Of course, we're all over social media, so look us up there, like and subscribe. And again, just thank you guys for attending today, and we look forward to seeing you, well, some of you probably tomorrow, and look forward to seeing the rest of you guys hopefully in November for part 3.
Yep, thank you, everybody.